I don't know about you, but to me it feels like trans activist violence against women who are critical of gender ideology is getting worse. This year alone, we've had multiple examples of women being attacked, mobbed, threatened, or harassed for supporting single-sex spaces. But there really is one case that stands out to me as being probably the worst one yet. Recently, ReduXX reported on the case of Ruby, whose name we changed to protect her identity for reasons that are going to become very obvious as you listen to her story. Ruby is from Australia and came to us with horrific details about her ordeal having been left permanently disabled by a trans-identified male who targeted her during a night out. Last September, Ruby was at a social event with her partner when an individual passed her and shoulder-checked her out of the blue. Like anybody, Ruby called out her aggressor, but she made the fatal mistake of using the wrong pronouns. Ruby told us that when she called her assailant a he, the people around her immediately looked shocked and offended, as though she'd done something wrong. At first, Ruby was confused. She didn't even know the man in front of her was trying to present as a woman. She just thought he was a dude with long hair. Despite her confusion, Ruby was initially going to let it go, and she tried to get back to the night of fun she'd come out for. Until suddenly, she was attacked from behind. Ruby was pushed to the ground with tremendous force, only her arm protecting her skull from impact with the concrete. Ruby told us that she felt her shoulder shatter and the pain reverberate through her entire body. Take a look at her injuries for yourself. Warning, these are pretty grisly. Mind you, this is after they'd healed for a little bit, so you can imagine how much worse they were beforehand. Ruby sent us her medical records, which showed that she was admitted to the emergency short stay unit and diagnosed with a fractured shoulder. She was slated for surgical intervention, but an operative team decided against it at the last second. With the help of Facebook friends, Ruby was quickly able to track down the man who had assaulted her that night, identifying her attacker as a trans activist who goes by the name of Sarah Cadzow. It quickly became apparent to Ruby that someone at the event she had attended had alerted Cadzow to her Facebook page, which was mostly dedicated to her gender-critical views. Ruby turned this information over to the police after being discharged from the hospital. But despite the fact that she was injured and had been hospitalized and even had 2 witness statements substantiating her report to the police, she said they were sluggish to act. Ruby told ReduXX, they seemed to be handling the assailant very delicately, and that the police didn't seem to take that concern seriously at all. Ruby says she noticed a definite tone shift when the police found out her assailant was transgender. In total, it took 4 months before Cadzow was finally charged in January of this year. He appeared in court on April 14th, but Ruby messaged us after the hearing and told us that the case was adjourned until May. This poor woman was violently attacked because of what she suspects to be her views on gender ideology, and the legal system doesn't seem to think this is at all a big deal. This is objectively wrong, and the fact that a violent crime is being dealt with so lightly, seemingly because it involves a man who self-identifies as a woman, is disturbing. But the worst part is that Ruby has been left with life-changing injuries. Ruby was told by a doctor that her ability to lift her arm above her head ended the moment she hit the ground that night. Let that sink in. These are life-changing injuries. Ruby will never swim again or be able to play basketball with her son. She was a musician but now says she can't play gigs too often because of the constant pain in her shoulder and arm. In a sane world, what happened to Ruby should have made headlines around the world. It should be unthinkable that a woman was violently attacked and permanently injured simply for believing that men shouldn't be allowed to use women's restrooms or play in women's sports or go to women's prisons. But this isn't a sane world, clearly. And for me, it begs the question, how brutal does an attack committed by a trans activist need to be before women are finally taken seriously about this issue? How much more damage has to happen? One thing's for certain, it's getting scarier and scarier to be critical about gender ideology, but fortunately, women aren't backing down. In fact, it feels like we're getting louder than ever. Even if it might seem bleak, keep fighting. Fight for Ruby, fight for Kelly J. Keene and Riley Gaines and every other woman who trans activists tried to bully and beat into silence. They can't shut us all up.